All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian. I'm here with Allison, and this is Maintaining Frame number 22. Depp gives men a voice. NBC spouts more anti-male domestic violence myths, where we're going to be looking at an article that at first glance may appear to be a bit white-pilling.
Well, it's
sort of.
white-pilling.
I mean, there's a little bit of it, you know.
It's white-pilling because the mainstream media is being forced to address this issue. But of course, they do their usual sleight of hand to try to minimize or discredit or just schmooze the truth towards their narrative.
Yeah, they got to massage. They got to massage the lies out.
Massage the message, yeah.
Yeah,
Just get those lies up front. But yeah, and we're going to point it all out because we've been here doing this and dealing with this issue for, well, I've been for decades, and Honey Badger Radio has been for almost a decade. So we know all the tricks and we know all the stats. So we're going to take NBC to task for what they have said in this article. Having said that, again, it is a white pill because they are forced now to address this, even if it's in an underhanded way. And it's good that they are reporting that men have felt empowered by Depp getting his story out there to tell their own. So I just want to remind everyone that if you want to send a comment through, the best way to send us a comment is through feedthebadger.com/justthetip, which you can also access on our banner under Feed the Badger. So feedthebadger/justthetip. Send your message, no censorship, and we get the full benefit of whatever amount you send. So please do take advantage of that. And Brian, do you want to read the first chapter?
Yeah, we'll do a couple of paragraphs. We're going to do this like sixth grade. All right. Sure. So let's bring up the article. This is from NBCnews.com and is entitled, Male Domestic Violence Survivors Say They Feel the Depp Heard Trial is a Turning Point. After Johnny Depp said he was a victim of domestic violence, some men say that they've been empowered to speak up about their own experiences with abuse. So this is sort of like the launch point for this article is essentially it begins with an acknowledgement that, you know, there are men who are seeing this and they're like, oh, I can speak up, you know, like they're not alone, right? I can seek help.
Response, really. Like, honestly, it's not just the fact that Johnny Depp stood up and said, I'm a survivor of domestic violence. It's the response that he's received. That's a big deal. The fact that women are supporting him is what these men are probably seeing and saying, hey, that actually makes it more safe for me to talk about this issue. Because a lot of men, when they talk about how they've been victimized in domestic violence or sexual assault, they get an unbelievably hostile response from the institutions that are supposed to be helping them, which is sort of expected because those institutions have been poisoned for generations now. They get a very hostile response from the police. According to Denise Hines' help-seeking experiences of battered men are far more likely to be arrested when they ask the police for help from an abuser than the woman who abused them. So, I mean, just think about that. And think about how much bias male victims have to face from the institutions that are supposedly there to help survivors or victims of domestic violence and do not help male victims, period. In many cases, men will be counseled not to contact the police unless it's a life or death situation, because they are likely to end up in a worse position after having contacted the police. And of course, men have expressed constantly that they actually are in contact with frontline mental health services. They often aren't believed, or they don't get the help that they need. In fact, men who have experienced domestic violence often report that their best source of assistance and support is their friends and family, not institutions, not domestic violence shelters, not the police, not social services, and not therapists. It's the people around them. So seeing women come out and for Johnny Depp, seeing them support him is probably a big source of relief and courage for men who also experience the same thing, because then they feel that perhaps they will get a similar response, or perhaps their relatives and friends seeing this will start to think about giving a similar response to a male survivor. So that's really good. That whole thing is a big white pill for me. Watching women's response to Johnny Depp and seeing them support him has been a big white pill for me. The mainstream media's response.
Well, we're gonna get in. Yeah, we're gonna get into it. It has
lacking.
It has been weighed. It has been measured, and it has been found wanting.
Big box feminism's response. Pretty loathsome. But women on the ground, women actually coming out and supporting Johnny Depp and the men in their lives, that has been very heartening to see. So let's get into it. Let's see how NBC ran.
Let's get into it. All right. This is by Calhan Rosenblatt. As Johnny Depp's defamation case against Amber Heard nears its conclusion, some men who say they have experienced domestic violence pinpointed a defining moment in the trial that, for them, felt pivotal in changing what it means to be a male survivor.
I want to add something here that they are omitting, and it's rather telling. Lots of female survivors have also come out and said that Johnny speaks for them, or at least they see themselves in Johnny. And it's telling that NBC has omitted that.
Yeah.
Because that would tend to actually increase the sense of sympathy for the people who are recognizing Johnny Depp's domestic violence and recognizing the need to recognize male victims of domestic violence. But that's just something I wanted to point out. That's
an important point, because we are talking about something that really shouldn't be treated as a gendered issue, but has been, right?
But has been, yes.
But it has been framed as a gendered issue.
It absolutely isn't, and it's funny because as a men's rights activist or men's issues advocate, I've always advocated for seeing domestic violence as a non-gendered issue. It's a social ill. Men engage in abuse, women engage in abuse, men and women can be victims of it. And when you look at all of the evidence, you're much more likely to be able to draw a reasonable solution for people who experience it, and maybe also reducing the frequency of it. It's not us who gender this. It is entrenched feminism. And they've built on a foundation of conservatives who regard protecting and providing women to be far, far more important than even fairness when it comes to men and the justice system. So I'm not signaling out feminists. They just sort of perfected the situation that conservatives lay the foundation for. And so this is in the institutions that are actively biased against men is the fruit of their collusion, shall we say. Because if there's one thing that feminists and conservatives can agree on, it's misandry.
Yep.
No offense. And I'm not talking about libertarians or fiscally conservative individuals. I'm talking more about the socially conservative.
Sure.
They can definitely find common cause with feminism when it comes to misandry. If not for men that they regard as their in group, then definitely men that they regard as their out group. All right, let's all
right. Yeah. So earlier that month, a recording was played in the courtroom. In it, Heard says, "Tell people it was a fair fight and see what the jury and judge think. Tell the world, Johnny. Tell them I, Johnny Depp, am a victim too of domestic violence, and it was a fair fight, and see if people believe or side with you." Depp was asked on the stand how he responded when Heard told him to tell the world that he was a domestic violence survivor. He told the courtroom, "Yes, I am." For some of the men watching who had endured violence from a partner, the frenzied response to the trial has felt personal. When I initially heard about the case, I was a little shocked. I was like, wow, who would have thought that this could happen to Johnny Depp? Recalled Tony Enos, a Philadelphia pop singer who said he survived domestic violence. So another person that experienced it.
Well, I don't think that NBC would, if a woman said I'm a survivor of domestic violence, I think that they would refer to her as a survivor, not he said he survived.
Yes. No, you're right. They would have just described her as a survivor as opposed to this man who is a man who has claimed to have been a survivor. Yeah. All of a sudden, we don't accept claims right up front.
And incidentally, if somebody describes themselves as this and they're not actually implicating anyone, I think it's fair to just go with what they're saying. He's not pointing fingers at any woman and saying she did it. So we don't need to have skepticism in this instance. I don't think. If we're not in a situation where we can be perpetuating harm on another person as a result of believing somebody's claim of being a survivor or having experienced domestic violence, then I think it's fair to extend the benefit of the doubt. It's when you're in a situation where you can enact some kind of harm on another person based on an allegation that you have to retain that sense of skepticism. So I just wanted to point that out too. There's no need to have the skepticism here, NBC. Why?
Yeah. Okay. Well, it wouldn't benefit him either. So that's usually when I become skeptical, is if someone is, where there is clearly like a way that they could benefit from making the claim, whether that is to destroy someone else's reputation or if that's simply to like lift their own status up as a victim. But that doesn't generally work with men. So I don't think that, he would say that just to get some clout. Enos, who also works as a counselor to other men who have survived domestic violence, said seeing a man who is perceived to be as powerful, wealthy, and famous as Depp claim that he endured domestic violence has made him feel less alone.
Good on him that he's going out and helping other men. That's a good dude.
Yeah. Hopefully he's not operating in a feminist framework to do it, but I mean, it's kind of hard to avoid, though. It's kind of everywhere and it's ubiquitous. So if people use it, I don't think it's necessarily on purpose every time. I think it's just because it's like the general, it's the general waters it's the gigantic fart cloud that we all live inside of. So when we're like, man, the earth just doesn't smell very good. We don't realize we can walk out of the fart cloud and it'd be like, oh yeah, flowers. So
what are those? Haven't seen them for a while.
Oh my God, it's so
men
sweet.
And women actually having conversations with each other without being terrified.
But I mean, most people are living in the fart cloud, so they're just gonna use what they think is the truth as they know it to try to help people. And I'm sure that they have more than a couple of run-ins with some cognitive dissonance. But anyway. The awareness is everything, Enos said. Men can be survivors of domestic violence and interpersonal violence, too. NBC News does not normally identify victims of domestic violence, but Enos gave his permission to use his full name.
Okay, fair enough. So now they've titled him an actual victim. All right, that's good. Props to NBC for
it's a baby steps.
Yeah, baby steps.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll take it.
Coming forward, with his full name and also helping other men. That's good. Good on you.
It's true.
All right.
All right. Shall I continue?
Yes.
All right. So next, I guess what would you call it? A section
at every stage.
Say this new segment, I guess. Male victims are still not an accepted thing. So now they're going to go into some data. 1 in 3 women. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yes. Let's go through all of the data. And then I'm going to explain how absolutely nefarious these next 3 paragraphs are. So go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. 1 in 3 women has experienced some form of violence from a partner compared to 1 in 4 men, according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, or NCADV. The breadth Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of money to be made in this. It's a business. The breadth between those numbers grows in 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men when it comes to severe violence, such as burning, beating, or strangulation by an intimate partner, according to the NCADV. So they make a new category called extreme violence or severe violence, and all of a sudden it's, you know, the gap.
Well, it's more
expands.
First of all, why is it necessary to once again frame women as the primary victims? And I'm going to get into the numbers because the numbers are deceptive as well. But first off, right off, in an article in which you are supporting male victims of domestic violence, why do you have to make them feel like the lesser victims? Why is that necessary, NBC? Like, what compels you to keep doing this? Like, this is not helpful. And I will get into why this is also very, shall we say, it's misleading. The numbers are misleading how they're selected. All right. Keep going, Brian.
All right. So 1 out of 2 women who are murdered are killed by their intimate partners, according to the NCADV, and 1 in 13 men are killed by their partners.
So we continue on with the minimization of male victims.
Yeah, like they're just throwing these numbers.
Yeah, we continue on with this idea that women are the real victims of domestic violence. Let's look at this and say, well, let's make men feel like they are the lesser victims. Why do you need to do this? Now, this particular statistic, the way they get this one is they compare the rate of murder, all murder. And the thing is that men are far more likely to be murdered by strangers because criminals preferentially choose men as their targets. And also men are more involved in gang violence, etc. So this is a very dishonest statistic. Very dishonest. They are comparing all murders of women and all murders of men, and they're saying only this number of women are murdered by intimate partners. They don't break down gender either. Many of them are also murdered by other women. And this many men are murdered by intimate partners, and it's only 1 in 13, guys.
I was gonna mention that you know, the in many cases women are murdered by female partners, and they're leaving that out. They're intentionally not mentioning. Yep.
They don't even include it. All right, so that's one part of it. Then in addition to that, there's a story behind those numbers as well that really reframes everything. So final paragraph.
Yeah, can I just mention, because I don't know if you're going to mention this, but I wanted to ask, when they say 1 out of 2 women are murdered or killed by their intimate partner. Now, obviously, like very few, you know, very few couples end with someone murdering someone else. So we are looking at like really, I guess, you know, a very small number compared to like what the vast breadth of like dysfunctional relationships might be, which, you know, maybe they're violent or they're abusive or whatever. But what is interesting is that they're saying 1 in 13 men are killed by their partners, but there are ways that women get men assaulted, abused, and even murdered without getting their hands dirty, right? Like by you know, you've probably seen. I see this all the time. These like, have you guys ever seen those they're like true crime things where a woman
hires.
Yeah, a woman hires a hitman, and the hitman is like an FBI agent or a cop or something.
Yeah,
and
that's not counted.
Yeah, that's not counted, but they do it all the time. Or they get a boyfriend, or not a boyfriend, but like an orbiter to like, you know, take their boyfriend out or take their husband out or whatever. And that's not counted. So
it's not
since in general, women usually do these things by proxy, we're not getting like the real numbers. I mean, this is like yeah, go ahead.
It's actually even worse than that. When we get down to the nitty gritty, when I gave you that PDF and we look at the actual statistics and how they have changed over time.
Yeah.
That's where the real meat. But you're absolutely right. This doesn't count proxy violence. It doesn't count. That's considered multi-offender murders, not domestic violence.
Yeah.
It's not even considered. So, and also, if Johnny Depp had committed suicide under the onslaught of Amber Heard's
that wouldn't count either.
That wouldn't count either.
Yeah, exactly. Or engage in self-harm or whatever.
The biggest risk for a man to commit suicide is the breakup of a relationship or a troubled relationship. So most likely being abused in a relationship.
Well, would that count a loss of his children or a feeling that his relationship with his children is extremely stressed or strained? Because that was what Depp was most worried about, was the way that his kids felt about him or saw him, exactly, based in that article that, you know, that Amber wrote for, was it The Sun? Or maybe it was The Sun that he was suing, but, well, you know, where she wrote about the domestic violence. So,
yeah, definitely. That's an aspect of it as well. But this final paragraph, this one is the real kicker. Okay,
let's do it. In addition, an information sheet from the NCADV, which is the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, acknowledged that, anecdotally, the organization knew of women being the primary aggressor towards men, but did not have data, quote, that quantified how often women were identified as the primary abuser in the relationship, end quote.
Deceitful. There is tons of data now on women as aggressors in the relationship. This organization is very selectively looking at the data. And NBC didn't even ask anyone who researches or advocates for male victims of domestic violence, as far as I can tell, because they're not being quoted in this article. They don't ask these researchers, the researchers who have access to this information, where are they? Instead, NBC asks an organization that's apparently about minimizing male victims of domestic violence. And I'm going to get into that because I'm going to ask Brian to bring up the, not the PDF, but the
gender differences and patterns. Yes. This chart.
Not the. I want you to bring.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, the
NCADV.
Yes,
thing.
That one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're going to take a look at these statistics because I looked at where they come from. And let me see where you're at here.
I'm on the first page. So this is the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. It's supposed to have useful info. It's kind of like a flyer, which for me anyway, immediately raises my hackles because it doesn't strike me as very like academically done. Not that I trust academia anyway, but
it has references. We can't go through the whole flyer, but we can go through a few of the initial points. And I'd like to direct you all to the first bullet point. In the United States, more than 10 million adults experience domestic violence annually. Now, I want you to pay attention to the fact that this first bullet point talks about an annual statistic, so the last year statistic. The last year statistic is the most reliable, the most accurate, the most relevant to actual services. So it informs how many people are likely to need the services, what kind of services they're likely to need, the kind of funding you're going to need to deal with the people who are having these issues yearly. Okay. So it is the statistic that you use in order to describe domestic violence or sexual violence is the last year. And researchers actually in the field have actually suggested that they probably should be using the last 6 months if they want the most accurate statistic, because it has the least amount of memory errors. The further back you have to remember, the more memory errors you get. But there are other problems with statistics that go past more than a year. And that is that people who are severely impacted by these negative events drop out of the survey. They become homeless, mostly men really, because they're the ones who don't have services, become homeless, suicide, drug abuse, all kinds of reasons why they're not being captured by the instrument after about a year. All right, so 1 year is the gold standard for research into sexual and domestic violence. Their first bullet point refers to a year, like an annual statistic. Their second bullet point, which I looked into, because I found out that the survey that they use is the Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, which I believe is in its 5th year. And what is fascinating about the Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey is that for 5 years in a row, perhaps not the last year, but for many years in a row, it has found that men report an equal amount of domestic violence. And I'm pretty sure it's very, very close when it comes to severe forms of violence as well. And stalking and sexual violence. Equal. Men report equal amounts if you restrict it to the last year. And the reason why is memory errors get introduced. Men start to soften their memory of the abuse that they experience, especially at the hand of women, because it doesn't conform to the narrative, to the societal narrative. And we all do this. We all actually conform our memories to what we are told is societally correct. So when people say, well, women are the victims of domestic violence, men aren't, men are actually conforming their memories to that, especially when they're victims of women. But even more disturbingly, men don't have any services. So they're far more likely to drop out of these surveys after the year. They're far more likely to be dead by suicide, dead by overdose, dead by having lived in the streets, because they don't have any support. Not socially, not institutionally, not from the police, not from social services, nowhere. So they're left with this pain and the shame of the pain, and they're dealing with it on their own, and they're more likely to take matters into their own hands. So they're not even captured when it comes to lifetime statistics, because they've dropped out. They're dead. Or their lives are completely shattered. So they're no longer available to be interviewed. And then they use, let me read. In each of these adults if each of these adults experienced only one incident of violence, an adult would in U.S. experience violence every 3 seconds. It's the third bullet point. 1 in 4 and 1 in 10 men experience sexual violence, physical violence, and/or stalking by an intimate partner during their lifetime. Do you see?
Yes.
Do you see how we've moved from the end? Yeah.
Yeah, they shifted away from the 1 year thing, and instead
shifted away.
Yeah.
First bullet point, 1 year. Third bullet point, where we see the next statistics, lifetime. Why did they do that? Because lifetime minimizes the rate of male domestic abuse.
Because again, men, they don't get support from the system, so they're no longer a part of it, so they don't get recorded. A lot of them commit suicide, or they go to jail or something, and they're just not a part of the data anymore. So and it's because they're neglected. So that's why they expand it to include lifetime, because women in general are more likely to take advantage of any service that they can get their hands on. And even
fair enough, if it's available, they should.
Sure.
But it's available to women, so women have more support. And then they have the statistics like approximately 1 in 5 female victims and 1 in 20 male victims needed medical care. Well, you've gone from an annual to lifetime. And now we're probably looking at the male victims who managed to survive with no services. Well, don't you think that's going to slant far more towards the men who were less victimized, didn't need medical care, didn't need legal services, didn't sustain injuries, weren't violently raped, weren't violently beaten, weren't burned or shot? Like, if you're looking at this, they are taking a snapshot of women who are supported in surviving the extreme forms of violence, and men who aren't. And they're finding, there are far more female victims. Yes, maybe because women are far more likely to survive. And so this is a completely distorted statistic. And it's even more telling that this agency goes from, we're going to talk about the annual rate, the reliable statistic, the one that really relates to actual services, in the first bullet point. But by the third bullet point, we're going to talk about the statistic that minimizes the rate at which men are victimized. And there's actually a reason behind. In some ways, you can't fault this particular organization for doing it. I've used this anecdote before. It's really telling. There was a group, I think a group of doctors in the Congo that treated men and women who sustained injuries and mental issues as a result of being victimized sexually during the conflict. So essentially, they were treating male and female victims of wartime rape. And the director of this treatment facility was approached by one of, I imagine, their major donors, and a Dutch Oxfam, which I believe is a Christian organization. They were approached by Dutch Oxfam, and the individual was told, this director, if he treated any more than 30%, like if the people who he treated through his programs, the men who he treated, ever exceeded 30% of all of his patients, Dutch Oxfam would remove his funding completely. So they would remove funding from both the male and female victims. But because he was treating too many men, they'd throw the female victims under the bus too. And this is the atmosphere that we operate in. It's twofold. One, we have donors who are often men, often conservative, who do not want to support other men and will withdraw their support as soon as they feel like they're supporting too many men. And on the other hand, we have the feminist academic industry and the domestic violence industry that is catering to those men or those conservative groups or those feminist groups who will only fund services if they primarily benefit women. So you got these two prongs, and on the domestic violence, the feminist advocacy domestic violence front, they've done a whole bunch of stuff to make institutions actively hostile to male victims of domestic violence. For example, in the 80s, we used to have the Family Violence Protection Act, or the Family Violence Act, which was gender neutral. Feminists came in, removed that, and replaced it with the Violence Against Women Act, which is explicitly anti-male. Or against male victims of domestic violence. Later, they introduced what they called the mandatory arrest policy. I believe it was a policy. And strangely enough, when they demanded that the police make mandatory arrests in domestic violence cases, the number of women who were arrested skyrocketed. Because what was happening up to that point is if the woman was violent, the police just sort of soft-handled it. And they're like, yeah, well, just go to take the man to the drunk tank and tell her to sleep it off and whatever, right? They wouldn't arrest her. But now that they were forced to arrest someone, they started to arrest women. And so there was tons and tons of women being arrested for domestic violence. The feminists did not like that. So they came back and they created the primary aggressor policies, which essentially means the one that's more of a physical threat gets arrested. Who's generally bigger and stronger than their partner? Men. And then they also created quotas so that if police ever arrested more than 15%, if the arrest for domestic violence ever exceeded 15% female, police departments were investigated for gender bias against women. So it's like there's a huge amount of work that's gone into making institutions actively hostile to male victims of domestic violence. And also, there is a huge amount of a huge reservoir of statistics that actually look into female aggressors, the rate at which female aggressors aggress. And incidentally, it is close to equal. Women are more likely to initiate, probably because there's not as much social censure against them being violent towards men. There's not as much social stigma towards women being violent towards men.
Nope, there isn't. It's actually celebrated a lot.
Yeah, and NBC didn't contact any of the researchers into this field, like Denise Hines or the ones that we talk to regularly. And if you're interested in the process of ideologically motivated researchers erasing symmetry in domestic violence, so that is men and women being equally responsible for domestic violence, look up Murray Strauss's Processes Concealing Symmetry in Domestic Violence. And he lays it out, how the statistics have been distorted. And right here, just from what I've seen, This is a distortion of the statistics. This agency goes from the annual number to the year lifetime number. Why? Because the lifetime number hides the rate at which men are aggressed against, how much men are victims of this. And so it goes.
Yep.
You want to continue?
Yeah. So am I going back to the article, or is there something else off of? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
I've completed my rant about how this doesn't have anything to do with men being humiliated to speak out. Men are actively discriminated against when they are victims of domestic violence. They are actively discriminated against by the media, by the government, by police, by the people who control the academic research into domestic violence, by domestic violence shelters, by domestic violence groups, by donors to domestic violence groups. And what's astounding to me is that anyone would blame men for what everyone else is doing to them. Okay? Mm-hmm. That could just be a defensive reaction to the fact that you're going to get no help nowhere. Well, I might as well take pride in being stoic if nobody's going to help me. And then what's astounding is that the same institutions that created this divide between male and female victims and forced second-class citizenship on male victims of domestic violence, the same institutions promote this idea that this is men don't seek help because of toxic masculinity. It's their fault they don't seek help. Herpaderp, which is also a lie, because men do seek help. They're just not helped. Okay.
Yep. All right. The facts of Depp's case must still be debated by a jury. While some on social media have devoured the evidence and have tried to deduce who was the aggressor and who was the victim.
Both sides.
Yeah, both sides. The trial is not in criminal court. So, you can't have opinions on this, regarding who is the abuser, because it's not a criminal case, okay? Rather, the case in civil court will determine whether Heard defamed Depp in a 2018 Washington Post essay in which she described herself as a domestic violence survivor, but never named Depp as the aggressor. They like to bring that up a lot, that she never named him. He reads that and then he just takes it. He just took it personally. And it's a trap, right? It's like, oh, well, she didn't name any names, so why are you upset? Says more about you than it does about her. But they've done this multiple times where they say, well, she never named him, but obviously unless it's James Franco she's talking about or some other dude that she banged, it seems the timing would suggest that it was done. And also, when she wrote the article, everyone just jumped on the Johnny Depp is a wife beater train anyway, and Amber Heard never came forward and said, no, that's not who I was talking about. So anyway, Depp is suing for $50 million. Heard is countersuing for $100 million. Just like a woman. I'm going to take twice what you had, so.
Just like a woman.
Well, to be fair, I sued the Calgary Expo and the Mary Sue for the cost of my booth, but they came back with they wanted $100,000, so there you go. Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, but they're the females in this. Okay, so
I'm the male. Okay.
Yeah, you're basically not a woman. You're not politically female, so just stop trying. Heard said that she struck Depp only in self-defense or in defense of her sister. She recalled a December 2015 incident in which she said Depp held her head down into a pillow, which she began to suffocate her. I thought, this is how I die, she said on the stand. He's going to kill me now. He's going to kill me, and he won't even have realized it. It wasn't this just something that she just claimed? There was no evidence of anything?
No, yes, again, this is all no evidence.
Yeah,
if they actually kept it to evidence, if they actually kept it to evidence, this article would be quite a bit different. But, let's, or at least things that Heard admitted to on tape.
Yeah, this is a little dramatic. I mean,
How come they're not even mentioning the fact of her abuse of him? I noticed that.
No, they're not. They're not mentioning the cutting off the finger thing or whatever.
No.
And the hitting that she admitted to. But yeah, whatever. Let's keep going. Depp has denied ever having physically abused Heard or committed domestic abuse, including his denial in the defamation suit. Again, I just want to point out that he must have known on some level how horrible a mistake it would have been if he attacked Heard even in self-defense, like even to prevent himself from becoming hurt by her. Even if he only did defense and Heard hurt herself trying to hurt him, he would be on the hook for that. He must have known that. I mean, why else would you say, I know men who were married, they're divorced. Like basically all of my friends that have gotten married have gotten divorced. And they've had really frustrating marriages. And they would tell me about how they would get so angry, they would have to leave the room and essentially go and hit the heavy bag or, go for a walk or they punch a hole in the wall or something. And the reason for that is because they know they can't take it out on her, even if it's just yelling or something, because they could get into big trouble. Like she could have the cops there kicking their ass if she wanted to, and they would do it. So, yeah. So again, this it doesn't make sense that he would do anything to Heard, even if it was he had some kind of emotional moment. That's very unlikely. Again, it's just the worst idea. He clearly was thinking about his kids, and didn't want to make that worse.
The worst idea. He doesn't have a history of it.
Yeah, he has no history of it with any exes. Yeah.
And also the evidence is on his side. Heard does have a history of abuse. Musk isn't talking. He's been seen in public with bruises when he was with Heard. So, it's like there's a history there, and she's admitted that she hits him, and he has severe injuries, recordings of severe, at least the finger issue. And it's like this is very, very dishonest. Like this coverage that NBC is still really dishonest.
Absolutely. It's like they have to acknowledge the fact that there are men that are speaking out, but they're like, how do we minimalize this? How do we make this not really that big of a deal? Like, I mean, that's all they have in mind is this has to be
minimized.
Yeah, minimized. It has to be reduced. It has to be shrunken down to near vanishing. Yeah. Because that's why they're doing the statistics the way they are, where they're saying, well, way more women still get it, and it's like, and honestly, it's not even a competition. I don't really care. Well, but these people do.
It isn't so far as they have constructed the competition, number one.
Yes.
Number two, if you distort the actual evidence of this, you're never going to find an actual solution.
Right. It's like they don't want a solution.
And also, it's horrible to be leaving so many men who experience this domestic violence out in the lurch. Like that's like there's an epidemic of this. Actually, my husband mentioned it because there was like a whole bunch of men who were coming out and saying, and he was like, do all men have this experience? Like, there must be a lot of men who aren't talking about having been domestically abused by women. There is an absolute tidal wave. This is a hidden epidemic in our society, a hidden epidemic of the sexual abuse of men and the domestic abuse of men. And news outlets like NBC are complicit in hiding it because, again, based on the way that this domestic violence group structured its statistics, oh, we're going to cite the annual statistic in bullet 1, but we're suddenly and inexplicably going to go to the lifetime in bullet 3. Based on that, they're minimizing male victims and the rate at which men experience this. Why? Except for monetary reasons. They know that if they do present the truth, people will stop paying for domestic violence. But hey, maybe if we look at the truth, we can solve the issue. We won't need so much money. Huh? You know? Oh, wait. Then domestic violence shelter directors might not be able to look forward to its retirement.
Yeah, they may have to find another way to pay for their $1 million mansions. All right, so I got super chat and a couple of Rumble rants. I should read them before they disappear, because sometimes they disappear and then I can't read them, and I feel bad about that. So, Ian Robbins. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, for some reason we got a Superchow, but it's not showing up in our channel.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, that is weird.
Let me do the super chat first. It might be a problem with your bot. Ian Robbins gives us $1.99 and says, "For truth, for the badger, for the middlemen." Thank you, Ian Robbins. And then over on Rumble, I got 2 Rumble rants from Josh Chasen, each one worth $1. The first one says, "Feminists are demonic." And the second one says, "Bastardized poor excuses for angels. Yup." Yeah, I mean, it's really corrupt. I can't really make, I would say, well, that's a bit hyperbolic, but you know what? It's okay to think of them as demonic. Like, if that language works for you, because I know that there are people that watch us that are religious, and that's how they would describe it. If that's what works for you.
They're certainly behaving in a demonic way, but then again, they're just behaving in a self-interested way.
Yeah, that's what makes it demonic, I guess. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, let me give some people some sensitivity training here. 20 years I've advocated for these issues, and I've watched them be absolutely, I've watched male victims be turned away, ignored, silenced, suffered secondary harm from the institutions that are supposedly out there to help men. It is really hard to not see it as evil and just try to retain my faith that the people involved either don't know what they're doing, but at this point I can't. How can you keep doing this? How? How can you keep turning people away in need, or men away in need? How can you keep marginalizing and denying them? I mean, is it just money?
Well, no, it's not just money. It's more than that. It's power. I think probably, it's access. It's like being, it's about power, because the money, well, I don't think it's money. I don't want to go on a massive
no, let's not. Let's go back to the article.
Let's get back to the article. But I think it's about power, and one of the because power is far more addictive, but also one of the most, the biggest highs that people get in terms of the execution of power is controlling information. It's controlling what people think reality is. And that literally is what they're after. They're about control over reality through language, through words, through statistics, through the disingenuous way that they record data. Because they're trying to, they build a narrative, they make it up, they shove it on everyone, and then everyone has to accept it. And that is a tremendous high, because now everyone is operating under your framing of reality. And it works on basically everyone. It's not even like a partisan thing. So I think that's what it's really about. But what's the super? Oh, I was going to say, what's the Superchow?
Okay, I've had to actually find it. It's from the Great Indoors. And $20. So thank you, Great Indoors.
Oh, great. Thank you.
I had an argument with my sister and brother-in-law recently, and they found the whole idea of males being victims of domestic violence to be laughable. Only weak men would find themselves in such a situation, is what my sister gave as a reaction. Meanwhile, they thought Will Smith's violent outburst was completely justified because a woman was insulted. Things got ever more heated when the subject changed to abortion. My brother-in-law became agitated. It's a relief, however, to see how many people who are following the Depp trial are changing their perception. It feels somewhat like a cultural shift. Yeah, he's forcing this.
Mm-hmm.
Depp is like the best thing I hope that he completely clears his name with his children, because I think that's probably one of the main reasons he's doing.
Oh, absolutely. This is like, I think this is really about his kids. I mean, I'm reminded of when I spoke with Greg Ellis a couple years ago when this whole thing was starting out, and Greg Ellis is a friend of Depp's. He was in Pirates of the Caribbean, and he told me that this is all about, like, for Johnny, this is just about his kids. He doesn't care about Amber. He doesn't care about, like, any of this stuff. He just wants to, he wants his kids to be able to look at him and, know that he is not what everyone is saying he is. That's basically all it is. It's the only people that matter to him. And I think that when you have kids, that is likely like what it's like for you too, if you've ever been in a similar situation. But yeah, that's all that matters. I mean, fuck Hollywood, like fuck those people. Who cares? Depp's got a family. He's got kids. So, and he'll get work again. All right.
Yeah, but people have to realize that there's a reason it's gotten to this.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is, when you look at the evidence, there is no reason it should have gotten this far, just from the evidence alone. And the fact that Depp is only able to fight back because he's the top 0.1% of men should tell you something about the system and who it's actually slanted for. Well, mostly just sociopaths, but sociopaths who are using women to get what they want out of the system, essentially, or using female victimhood. All right. In 2020, I want to read a paragraph.
All right.
Yeah. It's my turn. Get up and read in front of the class. I just have
in 2020,
Depp lost a libel case in the United Kingdom over allegations he hurt her. Depp sued the parent company that owns The Sun and the newspaper's executive editor in 2018 for wife beater. Justice Andrew Niccol ruled against Depp in 2020, saying the British tabloid had presented substantial evidence to show that Depp was violent against Heard on at least 12 of the 14 occasions. Wait, NBC. I thought we were we were saying, well, this can't determine guilt in domestic violence because Johnny is suing Amber for defamation and it's not a criminal case. Now you're saying that a defamation trial is proving that Johnny Depp actually engaged in this violence? So not only are you contradicting yourself, but also that trial, the judge had a conflict of interest, at least that's what I hear, and did not allow the evidence that now Johnny is getting into the court and in front of the public eye.
Yes. And the case was between Depp and the company, the newspaper, not between Depp and Heard.
And it wasn't substantial evidence. It would have just been preponderance of the evidence. And considering the way UK courts are, that could just be, well, she said she was.
Yeah. And also, it's quite possible that libel laws in the UK are different from those same laws in the United States. So they're trying to, and this is what I said before, like in all of these sort of pro-Heard, or more accurately pro the narrative about domestic violence articles that are coming out that are essentially just coping constantly over this Depp Heard thing. They're going to invoke the 2020 case as often as possible, like every time, because the idea is to discredit what is currently happening. So even if Depp wins, they're going to say, that he probably shouldn't have, and there's something wrong with the American justice system or something because he lost in 2020. It's like, that's all they do. It's like, this is like if he had won that case, they wouldn't be doing this.
No, this would be faded into the background. No one would care.
Yeah, it would disappear.
What's the other thing? If a woman came forward with Amber Heard, with Johnny Depp's evidence. No, this would not be the reaction.
No way. There'd be thought pieces everywhere about.
If Amber Heard had Johnny's evidence, this would not have happened to her.
Yeah.
Just based on the evidence.
If the genders were reversed, this would be a much different story in terms of how it's reported. But if, let's say, it was 2 women, we probably wouldn't hear anything about it. Things like this happen all the time, all over the world, constantly. So when a case is thrown in your face, although this is a high-profile case because of the celebrity nature of the people involved, but when the media chooses a story to throw in your face, you should ask yourself why you're making me look at this, because they do pick stories based on what is in them that might be useful. And I think they jumped on the Amber Heard thing because when it first broke, that was like a Me Too milestone. And so they jumped all over it, and they didn't care if Depp was going to get destroyed reputationally because they wanted to promote Me Too. And now that they've started that, they have to stay with it, even though, obviously things are coming to light that they would not have expected back when they started this shit in 2016. So anyway.
Yes, the case playing out in a court.
Oh, you're doing it still? Okay.
The case playing out in a court in Virginia becomes increasingly complex with each witness, a new piece of evidence. And yet, in the eyes of public opinion, Depp's popularity appears to be surging. From a Saturday Night Live parody of the case to a TikTok video posted by former NSYNC member Lance Bass. Lance
Bass, I think. Yeah.
Hashtag justice for Johnny Depp surging to more than 15 billion views. Depp appears to be the trial's de facto victor. Yes.
Aww, they're so mad when they say de facto victor. They're showing how unhappy they are.
That random people on the internet are going with the evidence, and the mainstream media or the corporate media, not even gonna call them mainstream anymore, corporate media is going with the narrative.
Yep.
Okay, it's because you lied, and people don't like that. In op-eds like the New York Times, Amber Heard and the death of Me Too, and the Guardian's Me Too is over if we don't listen to imperfect victims like Amber Heard.
Wait, have we done that one yet? Have we
actual abusers? Like, some question whether the public's treatment of Heard marks a turning point or even the end of the movement, warning that other powerful figures could seek to emulate Depp's comeback with litigation. Oh my God. We can't give men any ability to fight back.
No.
Because that might destroy the narrative.
Right. That's what they're protecting.
What is the pride that the media is basically saying what the domestic violence shelters and institutions, which have influenced the police from academia, have been doing, which is, male victims of domestic violence? Well, we don't like them. Fuck them. Throw them in a pit. Bury them. Shoot them in the back of the head. Get rid of them. It's fucking slime. We don't need them. They aren't part of our narrative. And now we see this in corporate media as a result of this trial, except, Johnny ain't dying. Johnny keeps clawing back out, or Depp keeps clawing back out of whatever pit they put him in. And on the force of the evidence, and the only reason why he's gotten the evidence before the public is because of his fame, his charm, and his money. If he didn't have the evidence, the public would have turned on him too. And that should scare everyone, because any man in Johnny's position without his fame, his money, his influence would be completely screwed. And that's nearly every man on earth.
Yep.
And this is the way they want it.
Yeah, that's the way they want it. No, because it's again, they're getting so much power out of this, so much influence. They won't give this up. Yeah. Okay,
who
so
knew that the damsels in distress could motivate so much, right? All right.
You can move the earth out of its axis with enough whining. I was gonna say we haven't gone through those 2 articles that they mention, Amber Heard and the death of Me Too, and the Guardian's hashtag Me Too is over if we don't listen to imperfect victims like Amber Heard. You see, the fear in those titles is palpable because it is a turning point. Like, more and more people are seeing that Me Too was a massive cultural mistake. Like from the beginning. Uh-oh, my computer's crashed. Ooh, hello?
I'm going to turn off my camera. Yeah, I'm turning off my camera because you are having your. And I want to reduce the pressure on your bandwidth.
Oh, that's okay. I'm back. Something froze for a moment, like my whole computer. I don't know why that is. Let me do a quick refresh.
We're getting too close to the truth. Let's do the conspiracy thing.
No, I'm still live. Yeah, I'm still live. Okay. So we haven't been kicked off. It's just my computer froze up briefly. You know what? That's okay. I'll turn off mine too. Because I feel,
unless we want to be here for 3 hours, we got to read more.
I feel left out or kind of singled out here. So, all right. Anyway, so what I was, we'll continue. But I was just saying, you know, the fear in these articles is palpable because they're losing control over the narrative. And the more and more men and women are, you know, seeing things for like they're seeing these situations as more complex than we've been led to believe, and that is enough to hurt them. I mean, the only thing worse than Me Too is Time's Up, which is no longer a thing because it was such a scam that even Rose McGowan hated it. But anyhow, experts have expressed concern about the level of vitriol directed at Heard, who has said throughout the trial that Depp abused her, could push some survivors deeper into hiding. She's talking about female survivors here.
But what about all the survivors who said that all the female survivors who said that, you know, they see themselves in Depp and their abuser in Heard? Wouldn't that speak to the fact that abuse knows no gender? Like, abuse is an action, not a gender. It's a behavior.
Yep. Well, no, absolutely, of course. But again, they can't even see what you're saying. Like they don't know about I don't know if they don't know. They probably do, but they don't care about women who are, you know, relating to what's happening. They're seeing themselves in Depp. So, despite the outdated stereotypes online about what a real victim should look like, which some experts say could cause a chilling effect among survivors, some men and male-presenting people who have survived violent relationships and experts who work with survivors say the trial feels like a turning point in the stigma against male survivors. Is that like on the side of male survivors, or what is that?
No, it's like it can't be one thing. They can't just be like, yeah, it's good. Johnny Depp is challenging the stereotypes around survivors by showing that men could be victims. Despite the outdated, but what they're saying is that Amber Heard is an imperfect victim.
Yeah.
And because we have stereotypes about how women are supposed to act, you know, this is causing a killing effect against among survivors. As opposed to, but you know, it's helping male survivors. So what they're saying is they're appealing to the possibility that this is, and then they're saying, but it could help men. And this is a really convoluted paragraph, but I would say that the ultimate thrust is just, well, women could be harmed, yo.
Well, I mean, like if anyone is creating a stereotype on what a real victim would look like, it's people like the one writing this article, because like the most against type would be a man, and and they're blaming us for having it's essentially they're protecting violent women by saying, oh, well, some women aren't the perfect victim. It's like, well, but the
perfect victim generally doesn't engage in the abuse.
Yeah.
or to be a victim, like, what is, okay, so female abusers aren't abusers anymore. They're imperfect victims.
Yep.
What?
That's what they're saying.
Oh, God, this is another double think addition to the lexicon, isn't it?
Yep.
Like made to penetrate. Oh, she didn't rape you at gunpoint, sir. She just gave you some surprise sex that you didn't realize that you consented to, but now we are going to label it as consensual. Good day. Fuck off. Go into your hole and die. Mimi Sterling, the CEO of the Family Place. Okay, I think the Family Place is the female feminist domestic violence shelter that created male services, and they said to spite advocates of male victims of domestic assault like us. So apparently, the fact that this Dallas-based resource center and shelter for men exists is because of us. Because they wanted to spite us. Because they were like, no services exist for men. That's what you guys say. Well, there's one service in Texas.
Oh yeah,
now
of course.
You're wrong.
Checkmate, MRAs. Checkmate, shitlords.
I hope that more feminists go on this bandwagon and are like, I'm going to make domestic violence shelters for men. Suck it, Honey Badger Radio. I'm like, I'm actually okay with that, but I will act outraged if you wish. Oh my God, how dare you make domestic violence shelters for men? How dare you do what we have been advocating for 10 years? Terrible. Anyway, but I found that hilarious. So Mimi Sterling, the CEO of the Family Place, a Dallas-based resource center and shelter for survivors of family violence, said some social work training outlines the belief that men can experience domestic violence like women based on power dynamic. You mean all of it?
Yeah, isn't this exactly what you guys believe? I mean,
this is the Duluth model. And how prevalent is the Duluth model? I mean, come on. It's just not an accepted thing in our society that men can be victimized in this way, Sterling said. Sterling, if we look at TikTok and Twitter, it's looking more like the average woman has, or average online woman has a better understanding of men as domestic violence victims than the entire institution of domestic violence services and exploitation. All right. So an age-old, this is the next section. I just really want to get through this because I know people are like,
that's okay. Is this it?
The next section?
I'll take it. An age-old stigma still affects survivors. For Jack, seeing a powerful man publicly state that he had endured domestic violence lifted a weight off his shoulders. Jack, a survivor of domestic abuse who asked that NBC News refer to him by his middle name to protect his privacy, said he endured domestic violence and sexual abuse in addition to childhood abuse. He said he kept quiet for many years because he was embarrassed. Quote, Mr. Depp is actually brave enough to come forward. I would have felt humiliated having to tell the public my 5'2" ex used to beat the crap out of me, Jack said, adding that after he watched Depp's testimony, he was finally able to open up to friends about what he had endured. Feelings of humiliation are just part of the stigma that has prevented so many men from coming forward to share their stories, Sterling said.
Okay, stop. Sterling is part of the industry that's been hiding men, male victims, been stigmatizing and constructing a chasm between how male victims are treated and how female victims are treated. Maybe she has, in the last few years, under the prompting of Men's Rights Activists, actually constructed services for men. So she's bridged a bit of it, but she's definitely part of that industry. And the fact that they are pointing to humiliation rather than institutional discrimination that's provable, you can see it in the statistics, you can see it in the actual policies that are promoted by the domestic violence institutions. You can see it in how they deal with the statistics on domestic violence and sexual assault.
Yep.
Instead of saying, oh, this is an institutional problem. No, it's a problem with the individual man. They just feel humiliated and they're just, they're too prideful.
Yeah, it's toxic masculinity.
It's toxic masculinity.
They're just going to pivot to toxic masculinity.
So big. Men's egos weren't so big. How did Amber Heard put it? Why don't you take responsibility? Or I can't even infect her. You remember that sound that she made when she was mocking him?
Yeah, I think.
This is domestic violence institutions that have instituted policies and procedures that actively discriminate against and minimize male victims of domestic abuse. They're actually engaging in abuse of male victims. And what are they saying? Well, maybe if your ego wasn't so big, maybe if you weren't so easily humiliated, maybe if you didn't have a fragile sense of masculinity, maybe if you weren't so toxic, you would come to me for help.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's why they, again, this is why they bring up the humiliation thing, because they're putting the blame on men. They're using their theories, their made up bullshit, their toxic masculinity to explain away why men aren't getting the help they need. It's not our fault. You know, we have a place in Texas that will be more than happy to take like all the men, but if they all the men in the US, and you know, but hey, they just don't want the services because they're fragile masculinity, you know. So
again, this individual is okay. Maybe she's at the beginning of a journey, actually, in talking to men who experience domestic violence. So I'll leave it at that.
All right.
She's definitely part of an institution that discriminates against men.
Yep.
And
the thing is, if we know it, she has to know it.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. I mean, and why didn't NBC actually reach out to people who investigate that? I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about the people we talk to. The researchers who research domestic and sexual abuse of men. Why didn't they reach out to them and ask about the statistics? I don't do that here. All right. Next paragraph.
All right. What does it start with? Raven Jennerson?
Yep.
No. Yeah. Okay. Raven Jennerson, the interim clinical director for the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, or RAIN. They're another bullshit organization that lies. And a licensed independent clinical social worker said all people, including victims, must work to relearn what it means to be masculine and how a masculine person should behave when confronted with a domestic violence situation. Stereotypes about how men should act and how they should cope with violent partners, especially in heterosexual relationships, are inaccurate and lead more victims to stay silent, experts said. This is just an expansion on the previous claim, which is that toxic masculinity is what's stopping you from getting help, i.e. it's your fault. Stop being such a fragile man. Stereotypes, feminist stereotypes, not male stereotypes. It's feminist stereotyping men. That's what, if anything, that's what it is. And these are the same people who basically just say, domestic violence, that's just wife beating. I don't know why we're using that other PC term. Yeah, but men don't come forward. Yeah, exactly. We want folks to know that there's no such thing as a perfect survivor. Perfection is relative, Jennerson said. Another thing no one says. Said nobody. I'm a perfect survivor. Who says that? No, nobody's ever said that. Sterling echoed Jennerson, adding that the stigmas have led to less research around male survivors and fewer resources for them. Jennerson also...
This organization that used its statistic, because they used a statistic from the Internet Partner and Sexual Violence Survey without recognizing that half of that statistic was men. So essentially, you know that 10 million annual statistic? They took, I think it was like about 2 million people raped annually. They omitted the fact, it was 2 million or something. Well, I'll just use that as an example. They omitted the fact that half of those people were men, okay? And then they used that 2 million to calculate how many rape pregnancies there were. I'm like, that's a lot of pregnant men. I don't think the trans community can accommodate that many pregnant men. Okay? So literally, they have distorted statistics in regards to rape, or they don't understand them, to omit or minimize male victims of rape. And this is from a rape advocacy group. It's just like there's... And again, it's right in line with, if you minimize male victimization, you get more attention, clout, and money. But I found that particularly absurd because, I don't think that male victims of rape are really at risk of getting pregnant there.
Yep.
I know some might be, some trans men might be, but for the most part, I don't think that there is going to be that many pregnant men as like I don't know. I think they were saying like something like 200,000. Like, yeah, I think that might be a bit of an exaggeration. 200,000 men made pregnant as a result of rape, according to Rain. What a joke.
All right. Let me read the last paragraph in this section.
Yes.
Sterling echoed Jennerson, adding that the stigmas have led to less research around male survivors and fewer resources for them. Jennerson also mentioned that while Rain has seen a rise in the reporting rates from other gender identities, men still lag behind. Sure. And again, you know, when they say so-and-so from this feminist organization echoed the same ideas that so-and-so from this other feminist organization did, and they think that that makes it more legitimate. Oh, well, it must be legit because, you know, they both agree. Oh, shit. Is that a Liana Kersner tweet? Oh, man, let me let me get ready because this is going to be great.
Okay. All right. I just want to point something out here. Okay. For 5 years, at least 4, I think we're going on the 5th year of the intimate partner and sexual violence. They have found parity between men and women in terms of sexual violence, experiencing sexual violence in the last year. Guess what you will never see on Rain's website? A statistic that says in the last year, men and women have experienced the same rate of sexual abuse and assault. You will never see that. And they say, oh, we don't have enough statistics. Yes, you do have enough statistics, Rain. You do. You just choose not to look at them.
Yeah, or not to talk about it. All right. The social media slant and justice by proxy. So they're going to talk about social media, which I don't think is all that important, but okay. On social media, men who say they have experienced domestic violence say Depp has opened the door for men and male-presenting survivors to share their stories. For some survivors, the seemingly relentless online support for Depp and the litany of disdain for Heard has felt like vindication and justice from afar, a proxy victory over their own abusers.
Boy, they really have to taint this, don't they?
They do. This was the last 3 articles we read where they have basically said, you know, Heard is being treated unfair online, you know. And it's funny because they think that the problem is that there are abusers or people who have been abused that relate to Johnny that are treating this Heard thing like some kind of like revenge fantasy. And it's funny because they're the ones that engage in that more than anything is literally why they're feminists. They're mad at their dads or something. And, you know, they're taking it out on all of society. So or
somebody who did them wrong or
someone who wronged them or. Yeah.
Yeah. What happened to the vitriol towards Depp when everybody was like, yeah, he's an abuser.
He's a wife beater. Yep.
And also consider that when you listen to how Heard treated Depp, the fact that she's being treated in the same way that she treated Depp when actually she isn't, to be honest, because the people who are making these jokes aren't an intimate partner that supposedly loves her.
Yeah.
And she was an intimate and she was abusing him. She was mocking him. She's making him feel like shit. And you can hear it in these recordings that they have. And the fact that people online are mocking, you know, it's no consideration. I mean, did NBC listen to what she said to Depp? Don't you think that this is going to make people angry? To listen to a person being abused isn't that the way you're supposed to respond to it?
Yeah. Well, they likely heard it, but their job is not to talk about what's happened and what's true. It's to spin. That's all they're doing. You're breaking up a bit, so you should get a little closer to your microphone.
Okay, I will.
All right.
Sorry, guys.
No, it's okay.
I start to lean further and further away from it.
Yeah, and you start. Well, you get your voice goes up a couple octaves, and you move back a bit. So.
Yeah, well, I don't want you guys to be subject to my squeaky, angry voice.
All right.
I've been told that it can blow people's eardrums out.
Yeah.
And this entire topic, it's the one that makes me, well, one of the few that makes me really livid is the way that
domestic,
yes, domestic and men who are survivors of domestic abuse and sexual assault, and how they've been marginalized by the industry and how they've been ignored, and silenced, is something that just is endlessly anger inducing.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate it.
Yeah.
So bad. I'm getting away from the microphone. Like it's hard for me not to be freaking furious as I read this snide, sneaky,
serpentine.
Serpentine, slithery, scaly article by the NBC where they're actually poisoning the well subtly.
Yeah. No, I get it. Okay. Searching the terms "I'm a survivor" and Johnny Depp on Twitter displays what appear to be thousands of tweets of victims describing how empowered they felt by Depp's case. There are a lot of male survivors of abuse out there that are talking about their experiences because of Johnny Depp. Canadian writer, producer, and YouTuber Liana Kersner tweeted, adding in a subsequent tweet that, quote, "Women are not default victims. Men are also abused." Now, she has also said, though, that she believed that both parties were abusive. So Liana Kersner did do both sides because, again, she was faced with the reality. She is a feminist and she claims to be a good, reasonable feminist. But no, there is no such thing as good and reasonable feminism. So when this whole thing was like coming out, she was like, well, this might be a both sides situation. And it's like, no, look at the evidence, speak to that. I don't want to hear it. So another person wrote, well, you want me to read Liana Kersner's tweet? No, okay.
It doesn't need more attention.
Yeah, it's not really worth mentioning. Another person wrote, quote, "I'm a survivor and I side with Johnny Depp because what happened to him also happened to me. The same level of depravity and intentional malice," end quote. I like how they said another person, like we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know if it's male or female, but what does the NBC think that they're reacting to here? They're reacting to the recording where she engages in, I'm like listening to this and I'm like, are you possessed by a demon herd? Like some of the stuff that I've heard, I'm just like, okay. Like that line from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, you can turn your back on the herd, but don't turn your back on the drug or something.
He probably shouldn't have turned his back on the herd.
No. You can't turn your back on the herd, and you also can't turn your back on the herd.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm listening to her, and I have this one particular recording where she's mocking him and with baby talk and this fake laughter, and I'm listening to them talk, and I have never heard two people in a conversation so discordant. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, it's almost like they're not talking to, like, she's talking to devils in her head and he's thinking he's talking to a human being.
Yeah.
You know, it was so creepy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just awful. We do have another super chat. Do you want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead. I just hope that after all this is done and the dust is settled, Herd should go get some help. Like, really. Not, because I mean, I wouldn't want her to become a burden on society, and she's young enough that I think that she could still, I don't know, find Allah or something and course correct. So, but go ahead, Alison. What's the super chow?
Okay, so this is from, you already know who it is. Incidentally, if you want me to say your name as anything but you already know who it is, please put it into the place where you're supposed to put your name.
Yeah.
Because I don't get the rest of the information. Gives us $5 and says, quick question, am I allowed to say the word if I'm just singing my favorite songs? Well, if you're doing it in private, you can do what you want. So I'll defer that to our resident expert on issues of minority nature. Brian, can he say the word?
Yeah. What word?
Yeah, say the word. The word is the word.
I don't care. Say the word. I don't give a shit. I want all that to go away. I don't want any stigma on words. Have fun. The only word I don't want to hear, though, is misogyny. That's not a thing. But anyway.
Well, at least not the way that they describe it.
Yeah, no, I know.
It's one of those words that needs to be reined in, and it's...
Quite a bit.
Yeah, quite a bit. Okay.
Istophobe in general should be reined in. But, all right, so let's see. Someone else tweeted that Depp had given them strength. As a DV survivor, a male victim, I'm disgusted that media is catering to #Amber. I lost years of my life. I still suffer from panic, nightmares, and feelings that somehow I'm the one in the wrong, end quote. And while the case is a defamation action in a civil court and no one faces a criminal conviction or jail time, the support is enough for some.
Well, that's Me Too, right? That was all like...
Yeah, that's what Me Too is. It's basically just, except that Me Too destroyed a lot more people's lives based on nothing but allegations. So, because then you get HR and the unions and all of these other unaccountable, institutions, and Me Too targeted men, and men were just losing their jobs. And God knows how they're doing now. They're probably, working at a fucking like Speedway or something, or
this distorted paragraph here, the next paragraph.
All right. And while the case is a defamation, I would never fight back because I would never want to be in Mr. Depp's position, Jack said, expressing fear that if he ever retaliated, his former partner could claim that he was the aggressor. See, I think a lot of men know this already. Now that
this is the distortion. That's the editorial comment.
Yeah, sure.
Depp is not fighting back physically. He's fighting back in terms of a court case.
Yes.
So what they're trying to say, this guy's like, oh, I could never hit back. No, I could never take her to court back because she could claim that he was the aggressor. Yeah. I could never fight back in court, likely child custody or a divorce court, because she would claim that he was the aggressor. That's what was most likely the interpretation here. But what they're injecting with their editorial comment is the idea that he's retaliating physically. That's what you responded to. I think that is actually dishonest, because I think probably what he's talking about is that Depp is fighting back in a court of law.
Yeah, he's doing it legally.
Yeah, he's doing it legally.
He's doing it litigiously.
Yes. And until Me Too gets its way, men can still, men who have a lot of resources can still fight back if they're also innocent.
Yep. All right. Now that he's come forward, it has given me and others allowance to say I've been abused by a domestic partner too. Normalizing the conversation and raising awareness. Some experts argue that hearing a man say in a public venue during a high-profile trial that he is a victim of domestic abuse could have long-lasting benefits. Often it takes high-profile cases, high-profile victims of anything to gain the change in our society and the change in perspective that is critical, Sterling said. The Family Place operates the only shelter in Texas exclusively serving male and male-presenting survivors of domestic violence, Sterling said. When residents of the shelter were asked about the Heard Depp trial, they said they felt validated and heard, a team leader reported to Sterling. Having a landmark case like this serves a greater purpose. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. In a way of normalizing the conversation and raising awareness around the fact that men absolutely can be victimized and awareness around what that victimization and the abuse looks like, Sterling said. Sterling said she can't say for certain whether the Depp case will lead to an increase in the male reporting statistics, but she said that she does believe that the more there is a national conversation around domestic abuse and how it affects men, the more people will come forward. It's horrible it's playing out on an international stage, she said. I do hope that part of the benefits come from victims saying, yeah, this is a problem. I need to get out.
Where?
Yeah, Texas, apparently.
No, I guess Texas.
It's the only place. I mean, what?
It'll be like a mass exodus, except domestic violence victims to her shelter.
Yeah.
that's the hilarious thing. It's like, yes, this is really important to raise attention to this, but we've known that this is a problem since the 1970s. And we have been pushing this boulder uphill, a hill called feminist academic advocacy. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
There is no way around it. Feminists are doing this. And a lot of people want to see feminists in terms of like angelic, oh, we're just bringing equality. Well, it's not equality if you only measure the. Sorry, it's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
And feminists only measure the female side. And they also harm women by constantly making women out to be victims. They are not.
You're breaking up again, Alison. Get closer to your mic.
They harm women by making women out to be victims of things they are not victims of, or at least not uniquely victims of, like domestic violence and sexual assault. Like I actually had a revelation. It was about, I guess, 2007 maybe. And I had been engaging with this stuff for years, but it didn't really sink in on an emotional level. And then one day I was walking through a parking lot, you know, the classic, like a sort of a deserted, isolated parking lot, the classic scenario of being jumped and raped. And I was nervous and worried about it. But then I thought about it and I'm like, well, wait, men also experience it. And in fact, rapists are most likely have been raped themselves. And for some reason, the recognition of men's lack of agency when it came to sexual violence lifted my fear, because I didn't have to be uniquely afraid because I'm a woman. That was such a relief. I can't even, that was a moment. It's hard to describe, but it felt like I had just stepped out of a weighted vest that I had been wearing my entire life. And it was just gone. It hasn't come back. Wow, that was company I never needed. And it was all thanks to feminism that was there in the first place.
Yep.
Anyway, so that's the NBC article, and I felt it was important to go through it because there is some serious distortion going on. I mean, they make a nod towards male victims, and maybe that it's a good thing that they're bringing attention. I see that they chose a really nasty photo of Johnny Depp, and about the only photo of Amber Heard where it all looks pensive and like fear. She's like the delicate lamb.
Yes,
I can just imagine, like, this is Johnny Depp the moment after he's like, oh, that gummy bear was.
Yeah.
And Amber Heard is like, did I just fart? I think I did.
Well, we can't tell because we're all in the fart.
Yeah, I know.
I've walked out of we've walked out of that, out of the methane cloud, but most people are living under the fart of feminism. So,
yeah, or the fart of the idea that the only thing we should center our lives around, and that somehow if you recognize male victims taking, because let's face it, there's a lot of conservatives who think the same thing. I mean, after all, in many ways it was conservatives behind the original construction of welfare to only be given to women who had no able-bodied man in the house, thus destroying generations of children. So conservatives have their role to play in all of this. And of course, conservatives are very willing to believe that men over there who are the out group are somehow, they hate their women, they want to subjugate them, yada, yada, yada. So conservatives still have this inherent belief that there's something evil about men, and it's an ideology that makes men good rather than manipulating and preying on the innate goodness of men. Or manipulating and preying on men's innate to men desire to protect and provide for women. You know, and again, I'm not talking about conservatives that, you know, want to conserve freedoms or are fiscally conservative.
No, you're talking about the socially traditionalists.
They tend to have a huge streak of misandry themselves. And you can't avoid it, because if you think that men anywhere in the past around the world construct societies for their own benefit at the expense of women, then you think very badly and you're wrong.
Yeah.
To do so. All right.
All right. So that's the end of the article. Shall we wrap it up? No Superchow. Let me look at Rumble. No new Rumble rants. But thank you guys for what you have done.
I think this is really important because we need to get this information about the statistics out there. And I know people are looking for information on the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial. I wish that the large YouTubers who are covering this might bring on an expert into domestic violence against men, perhaps. I actually messaged Popcorn Planet and suggested this. We could, there's plenty of them that I could recommend.
Mm-hmm. I've tried reaching out to Nick Rakita and that Umbrella guy. I mean, he's not, massive, but he's quite the following and he's very involved in this Depp Heard thing. But I'm not hearing, back from them. So it could just be that I'm a nobody. But if any of you guys know a way to reach out to someone that is either involved in this for, that they're reporting on this for legal reasons like Nick Rakita, or if they're more interested in it, just from a purely justice oriented perspective, which I think is what that Umbrella guy and some others are doing, maybe reach out to them and ask them, because this is an opportunity to share some really important information about domestic violence that I know that anyone who's trying to cover this in earnest has to be curious about, at least, if they're not aware of it, because obviously, women are just as capable of this kind of thing as men, and yet this is something that no one wants to talk about. So
no. All right,
you go ahead and do the things, and then I'll do my things.
All right,
and that'll
so
be
I
the
just
thing.
want to remind everyone that we are for Brian, Prim, and Hannah, or Prim when Prim gets Prim when are you here?
Yeah.
You're
good.
We are doing our monthly fundraiser for Brian, Prim, and Hannah, or Prim when she gets back from making more Primlets. At feedthebadger.com/project/badger-media-blitz. I think we'll have to do a final push. We might have to do a double show on Friday there, Brian. So that's something. Please do help us out with that to make sure we can continue to do this content. This is not the most popular content because we are talking about something that really bothers people, and that is men and how they are affected by women, society. But it's a really critical conversation to have, because if we ignore the issues of one half of the human race, that's not a winning proposition, shall we say, for the future. Not to mention that we're ignoring the issues of the half of the human race that's generally responsible for keeping our society running. If you want to look at the statistics and who is keeping the lights on, the heating, moving the goods around in our society, etc., that becomes very plain which half of the human race is keeping us all in Amazon packages and light and heat and housing. All right. So, and again, ignore them to our peril, because that's basically ignoring the knocking in your engine. Eventually you're going to break down on the side of the road. And so, I could argue that we're doing that right now. But anyway, so again, feedthebadger.com/project/badger-media-blitz. If you don't help us, nobody will, because basically if you're here and listening to this, you're one of those rare people who's capable of it. All right. And if you want to send us a message, feedthebadger.com/justthetip, and we will endeavor to read it on the next show. All right. Back to you, Brian.
All right. Well, if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Follow us on Rumble and DLive and Twitch and Facebook and Twitter, so that you can try all the streams and see which one you like the most in case we're not on YouTube. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show. And most importantly, please share this video, because sharing is caring, and because sharing is what the algorithm likes the most. So it's probably the best way to help us grow our audience. So thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of Maintaining Frame, and we will talk to you all in the next video.
Men's right activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.